Good morning. It's Dr. Sage. I just fell off my meditation cushion. And you may have to turn your volume up because I have a teenager sleeping. I had a video planned for this morning. It's Saturday and I scrapped it because I really wanted to make this video about the new Anti-Hero video by Taylor Swift, the new song. And because I'm having some major blocks, and we could psychoanalyze why on my Narcissistic Dad's video, which I've made like 3 times now. But I really want to talk about what I see as the trauma in the lyrics, the complex trauma for so many of us. The great thing about music and art is that it's always open to our own interpretation, our own projections. That is the beauty of it. And I've been on a lot of Taylor Swift TikTok variations on TikTok, I should say. And so I've heard a lot of analyses and they're all, to be honest, like so fascinating. But I wanted to talk specifically about trauma. And so given that that's what I talk about, I hope you'll enjoy this video. As I said, I have a teenager sleeping, or did I even say that? I have animals running around, I have dirty hair, and I just don't care. So I threw on some makeup at a bare minimum, but I hope you will find this video helpful and validating. And I want to give you some stuff to think about when you listen to music like this, or if you're triggered. If you don't know the song and you've been under a rock, no worries. I'm going to post the lyrics as we go through each thing. More cat hairs from Coco. I'm pretty sure Coco will make an appearance because she's running around like a crazy kitty this morning. Okay, let's get into it. I made a bunch of notes and I just kind of want to share from the perspective of a person who has complex trauma what can come up in a song like this. So the first part really says, actually before I do that, let me just say this. I made a card describing what the term anti-hero means. Just the essence of this word is really, if you're not aware, it's basically the idea often in a story where the anti-hero is a complex, has maybe some dark trait characteristics. Even in some references, they have some parts of a dark triad, which is basically psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, some parts, some personality traits of those dynamics, with this like, malevolent kind of dynamic. I'm so sorry, you're gonna hate me after this video with the noise. Please bear with me. Okay, Coco, come here, come here. So basically what we're talking about is a character who is complex, like all of us, right? Most of us are not just straight up heroes. We are complex, at times ambiguous in our own selves and lives. We have things we do that aren't perfect. And that is what I think makes this concept so interesting in terms of the very nature of how complex trauma can really make us afraid of our dark parts. It can make us feel ashamed of our dark parts and not even entitled to them. Like we're supposed to be perfect because we have these messed up parents. And so, for example, we're going to be perfect parents, right? It can go on and on. So the first lines are, I have this thing where I grow older, just never wiser. Midnights become my afternoons. And what came up for me is this older, never wiser is often the child inside. The inner child, the often broken inner child, doesn't often seem to grow with us. Like our bodies keep getting older, but the way that inner child views the world is often still very limited in its development. And that can play out into midnights become my afternoon. And then the next few lines are, when my depression works the graveyard shift and all the people I've ghosted stand there in the room. And so I think this deep sense of collapse and freezing, this very fractured, broken, depressed, wounded self inside can really play out in our lives. And that really can show up how we maybe lean into more avoidant strategies, more detached strategies at times. Like on the one hand, we want people, but we can also be very quick to remove ourselves. I've talked about in other videos how the flight response can actually be helpful in its positive side because it can remove you from toxic people and relationships. Sometimes we can misperceive that, but the idea of ghosting people is very common for those of us who have a lot of complex trauma because at our core, we don't trust people. we don't fully let them in. And I can only imagine, even from Taylor's perspective, you know, when you've been famous basically for the longest part of your memory of your entire life, letting people in and feeling like you can trust them, and not in the like, oh, I'm a celebrity, but like deep inside, what are your intentions? What are your motivations? And then Taylor, like all the rest of us, I'm sure, of course, holds her own trauma, her own story, her own pain that might prevent her from, you know, maybe it's in her family system, maybe it's something that happened to her in youth, or the way she's felt about herself in the world that has nothing to do with her fame and success. So that's one part that we can really feel that way. And that flight dynamic can be, like I said, very, very common, and that just need to disengage, because deep inside, going back to that inner child, we don't trust that people can love, accept, and see us for who we truly are. The next part is, I should not be left to my own devices. They come with prices and vices. I end up in crisis, tale as old as time. I'll wake up screaming from dreaming. One day I'll watch as you're leaving, 'cause you'll get tired of my scheming for the last time. And what came up to me there is how we're often scrambling to avoid that deep-seated fear of abandonment, that somebody will leave us, and that manifests and just this deep sense of trauma inside in things like substance use or people addiction to relationships, right? These vices, these things that we're trying to always get to fill us up and to heal those wounds. And that all of that, because of, like I've talked about, when you have a toxic childhood, who you might choose in your life, then creates more crises for you as you try to lean into relationships thinking they're going to heal that broken child story inside. And often they fracture new adult parts of your life, right? Ask anyone who's had a toxic adult relationship after having a difficult childhood. The greatest focus was often that relationship was going to heal and repair and finally give you all those things inside. And as a result, you come out of it with more bruises and more wounds and more vices and more crises. And so that really is that dilemma, that wanting to heal and finally be loved and accepted, but that often deep-seated fear of abandonment, and even abandonment of ourselves, that we don't even necessarily at times maybe know or trust who we are. And so we might pursue like relationships or vices or things to try to just not feel that and not experience that own self-abandonment that plays out. The next sort of lines are, of course, it's the chorus. It's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me. At tea time, everybody agrees. I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror. It must be exhausting, always rooting for the anti-hero. And this is where we kind of get into the idea of the anti-hero. And what I thought was really interesting here is, it's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me. I think right now it's like, oh yeah, someone's finally saying it out loud, you know, or all the videos are getting made. But the truth is that, yes, of course, often it is us. But I want to go deeper than that here and say that she's saying out loud that part that I believe is often that it's me, I'm bad. I'm not worthy inside. I'm the problem. And that's why people will often say, well, maybe I am the narcissist. I've heard this so many times by people who were abused in narcissistic relationships. And whether it's a childhood or a partnership, it's like deep inside you suspect that really it's all because of your lack of value, of worthiness in the world. And that what we secretly believe she's saying, right? And so I think it has this dual meaning, at least for me. It's like, on the one hand, yes, some people don't have any self-reflection. And that is the idea of staring directly at the sun, but never in the mirror as well. But also staring at the sun can be life-threatening, right? It's like this idea that the sun is what keeps and saves us. But at the same time, it's this idea of staring at sort of danger. This metaphor that you have to face something that could kill you, but you also can't like live without it, the sun. And so I think that's really complex there, that like you have to also, to heal, you have to understand that you have to validate your wounds and story, and also know that you hold this badness inside, and yet also honor that it's not all your fault. And at the same time, looking at the parts that you can control and you can heal, that if you keep avoiding that, you are missing out on healing some of the greatest parts. And so I always use the word parts because it is a matter of parts. It's like I talk about with patients, it's like a slice of pizza. There are all these slices, right? The trauma of the story, the part that belongs to us, the part that doesn't, the fears, the longings, the dreams, the wounds, the partners who hurt us, all of that. And so the idea of like we're rooting for this anti-hero, I often think too, as she's singing it, even to herself, we want Taylor at times to be more, of an activist or do these things. And I think she addresses that in other parts of this album. But it's like she's a complex human being too, right? And so are we. And so we want to like black and white it. I talk a lot about splitting when we have parents who have like borderline traits or narcissistic traits. They often see us and themselves as good or bad, especially borderline, but narcissists do it too. And so even as their children, even though we don't have those diagnoses, we can split in ourselves. I'm the hero, I'm the anti-hero. I'm all good, I'm all bad. But the anti-hero really is often a character who's driven by good intentions, but has these sort of dark qualities at times, these complex qualities, which I think is really much more accurate for how all of us are, as none of us are all one thing. The next part says, sometimes I feel like everybody is a sexy baby and I'm a monster on the hill, too big to hang out, slowly lurching toward your favorite city, pierced through the heart but never killed. And I mean, I've seen a lot of analyses on this. I think this one's a little more clear. It's like not only Taylor, I'm sure, being this, trying to come to terms with her own larger than life, like self, and am I a real person? And what does this even mean in the world? As the way she has to move through the world so differently than most of us. But this idea that the music industry also rewards, she's talked about people under the age of 25 and then you're done. And our culture rewards youth and, trying to at all costs avoid aging and always looking for the next 17-year-old thing. And yet, that only lasts, but that's a window of time that we deny ourselves in that. And how, in addition to with complex trauma, we can feel so outside ourselves. Like I've talked a lot about, it's like there's a wall between us and the rest of the world. There's just something different. And even in her video, she uses that kind of typical Alice in a Wonderland, larger than life, awkwardly going in the room. And I think in our heads and our experiences, in a very valid way, we can really feel that way. Whether it's in relationships or with ourselves, when we're trying to be social, but like there's like this other hypervigilant narrative running, and it's like we're trying to be present in the room, but our sensory issues are going off, or we just can't relax in our bodies. And I've talked about, it's like feeling like an alien, like there's something wrong and different about us. Not just bad, but just completely like from another planet and can't connect. And so I think that the idea of, this idea that we have to keep going, as we talk about pierced through the heart, like there are all these wounds we can have, and yet we have to continue to keep going, that there's parts of us that are almost dead inside or pierced and like leaking pain or wound, but it doesn't take us completely out. Most of us are still trying to find ways to live life in spite of all these wounds. And then the next part goes into, did you hear my covert narcissism I disguise as altruism, like some kind of congressman, tale as old as time. I wake up screaming from dreaming, one day I'll watch as you're leaving, and life will lose all its meaning for the last time. This one I think is very much about how we can try to feel like we're these outside operators trying to keep people in our lives, that fear of abandonment. She talks about leaving that deep inside, we're not maybe just worthy of it. And that this idea of covert narcissism disguised as altruism is like outside of the themes of the dark triad and this complexity of the anti-hero, is that we want to even say, what she's basically saying is even the good things, my altruistic self, is somehow bad, that it's driven by my narcissism, or how we can see this in the public eye, people that look like they're here for the greater good, but they're really just here for themselves. And the truth is that even in, the greatest, most giving person on the planet, we are still here for ourselves. There's a part of it that is very much about ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like this idea that you must always be selfless, especially I would say in the nature of mothering, or, it's like, yes, to an extent you want to give yourself for the greater good of the children you love, or the things you love, or your animals, but there's still a part of you that is getting something out of it. This is a common question for graduate programs in psychology. A professor will say, tell me why you want to be a therapist or a psychologist without telling me you want to help people. And I think that is profound, because if you think that we're all just doing it just to help, that's like crazy, right? You're not this otherworldly being concept that means you have no needs. There's no sense of self. But the point is that we get something out of helping you too. So many of us have these, as I've talked about, wounded childhoods. And so that gives us the ability to sit with you in a room and talk about and contain and hold your biggest fears, your largest shameful experiences in life, the things that hurt you the most. We can be present with you because we understand that pain in our own version, and we can hold a space for it. And I'm not saying that we're getting like some joy out of that. I'm just saying that that also can help us. Like, it's a relationship. As you're healing, I'm healing. Not necessarily about my own wounds, but there's a thing that's bigger than the both of us happening in the sacredness of a therapeutic space, for example. At least I believe it's a sacred space. And then there is this tale as old as time, right, that I'm talking about. All of these themes are about, this is nothing new, this idea of hero versus anti-hero, and right versus wrong, and all of those things. The internal sense of self that we can feel, that we don't feel allowed to have when we have complex trauma. And then, of course, as I mentioned, it goes back to the idea of leading and scheming, which I think is very common with those of us who are so desperate to have these healed relationships. Then she goes back and talks again. It's the chorus about it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. And then the next part is, I have this dream my daughter-in-law kills me for the money. She thinks I left them in the will. The family gathers round and reads it. And then someone screams out, she's laughing up at us from hell. And I think that this is really interesting too, because we all want to be loved and accepted for who we are. And yet, not only when we have trauma can we have real doubts that anyone really loves us and wants us for who we are, we live in a world that says money is valued, and beauty and youth and all these things. And so it's really easy to deep inside feel like you can't love me as I am. I've just been watching Love is Blind, which is a complete show, if you ask me, this season, and not really very rewarding to me in a very surfacey fantasy check out from life way that is normally enjoyable. But I don't, it's like, no, love doesn't seem to be blind for the most part. These couples aren't working out. I think in many people's lives there can be a way that loving each other for things beyond looks and money and aging is absolutely a real thing. But trying to find that purity and that depth and reality in a very superficial world is difficult. And so I can only imagine that, with Taylor's Easter eggs and hiding things and her, worrying about who wants her for who she is, or even her own children. But that kind of goes back to do you want me for who I am? Forget about her and money. It's like we all want to be wanted, especially if we've had childhood trauma and complex trauma, relational trauma I'm really talking about, often in childhood, where we're just longing to be seen and accepted and loved for who we are. I know this is going on longer than I thought. And so the last part is just talking about, kind of going back to it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. And what I want to share with you as you listen to this song and create your own meanings and your own values, I don't want you to hear it on the surface level of, yeah, it's you. You're the problem, right? Because I think people are making joking videos about that. And it walks this line between owning our stuff and just being I'm the narcissist, I'm the bad person. And so I just want you to see that in the terms of complexity, that like all anti-heroes, I think some movie references were Deadpool, Han Solo, Tony Montana and Scarface, Batman and Jack Sparrow, the character. I think that it's just important for you to hold that you are truly a complex person too, that you have dark, you have light, you have hurt, you have joy, and that when you have complex trauma, part of your journey, I think, is trying to figure out, who are you? Like, who are you? What is your identity? Where is your value? And to not split your childhood, even your parents, yourself, into these right, wrong, black or white narratives, but to see that there are parts that are beautiful, that are damaged, that are your dark parts that make you a human, a complex human. And there are parts of you that never deserve the wounds and deserve to be healed and whole. And so I just want to encourage you to sort of see yourself in that, that beautiful dynamic that you can own the parts. One of the strongest things to be able to do in life is to say, yeah, I can own my part in that. I didn't do it intentionally, but I did hurt people, my children, my exes, my friendships, and I can work on these parts. But other parts I can say, yeah, I did walk away from that situation. I ghosted that person and I don't feel bad about it because they were hurting and damaging my life and the relationship wasn't going to change. So I like this idea, as I keep saying, of parts, and the parts therapy and parts theory, but regardless of where you fall in that, I think for you to hold that you are all those pizza slices and to be able to honor each one of them without shame, and then to be able to step back and say, okay, this slice I want to be bigger or smaller, is a really healthy and important way to look at yourself and your story. So I hope you found this wasn't too rambling and helpful. I kind of want to get more current with things here too, and I'm just still struggling, as you can imagine, where I want to go, because there's just so much great content here on YouTube, and I don't want to repeat the same kind of videos. I don't feel like I am, but I know the topics sometimes I think, well, what can I say about this that's new? And so I'm still evolving and figuring it out like you are, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. I hope you have a beautiful Halloween weekend. Please stay safe and well, and I will see you by next Saturday. I might drop some videos. As I said, I keep struggling to make the narcissistic dad one, and I know why. My dad's birthday is coming, and it's honestly one of the most complex stories of my life. And I'm starting to cry in the last one, and so I was like, do I want to post that? Like, I might, I don't know yet, but I do want to show up as a real, authentic, vulnerable person, and person who has some clinical knowledge, but not some like psychologist who knows it all, because that would be a joke, because no one knows it all or anywhere close. So thanks for being here. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you next weekend, like I said. Okay, bye.